she up and left her family, abandoned them, including 2 children. 11 years after she went missing, Brenda Heist showed up at the sheriff's office in Key Largo, Florida. This was last Friday. And we'll show you this picture here because you can see this was Heist on the left. This is back in 2002. And on the right, this is Heist today at the age of 54. Her daughter was 8. Her son was 12 when Heist chose to walk away.
It was a humid April morning in Key Largo, Florida, the kind of morning where the air feels heavy, almost like the world itself is holding its breath. Inside a small police station, a weary, sunburned woman stepped forward. Her hair was graying, her clothes threadbare, and her eyes, hollow but strangely calm, carried the look of someone who had lived many lives. She gave the officer her name. Brenda Heist. The room fell silent. The name meant nothing to the officers in that small Florida town, but to a quiet community 1,200 miles away in Pennsylvania, it was the name of a ghost. Because Brenda Heist had been declared dead 11 years ago. In 2002, she vanished without a trace, no note, no goodbye, not even a phone call. She dropped her kids off at school one morning and was never seen again. Her family searched, begged for answers, prayed for a miracle. Detectives found nothing. Rumors spread. Years passed. And then, in 2010, a judge signed the paper that made it official: Brenda Heist was dead. But here she was, standing in front of the police, alive. Breathing. Speaking. A ghost, suddenly real. Where had she been? Why had she left? And what had she become in those long, invisible years between life and death? This is not a story about a crime. It's a story about disappearing from your own life. It's about despair, escape, and the strange, fragile hope that sometimes survives even when everything else is gone. Tonight, on the Found Files, we open the case of Brenda Heist, the Pennsylvania mother who walked away from her world and came back as a stranger. Before we begin, take a second to remember. For every Brenda Heist who returns, there are countless others who never do. So if you believe their stories deserve to be told, if you believe awareness can save lives, subscribe to the Found Files now. Because the moment you stop watching, someone else's story may fade into silence. Before she became the woman who walked back from the dead, Brenda Heist was just another face in a quiet Pennsylvania town, a wife, a mother, a neighbor who waved from her front porch. She lived in Liddy's, a postcard-perfect town in Lancaster County, the kind of place where people still borrowed sugar from next door, where kids rode their bikes down tree-lined streets, and where routine felt safe. For Brenda, that routine was her lifeline. Early mornings making breakfast for her 2 children, packing lunches, driving them to school. Afterward, she'd clock in at her job as a bookkeeper at a local car dealership, neat handwriting, good numbers, never late. By all accounts, she was dependable, honest, ordinary. But behind closed doors, life was unraveling thread by thread. Her marriage to Lee Heist had grown strained, arguments over money, long silences that stretched through the house. Bills piled up on the kitchen counter. Letters from lawyers began to replace birthday cards on the refrigerator door. She'd applied for housing assistance, hoping for a way to start fresh with her children, but the letter that came back wasn't approved. It was a rejection. It's a small word, denied, but in Brenda's world, it echoed like a verdict. Each day, she woke up feeling smaller, drowning in quiet desperation that no one could see. To the outside world, she was managing. Inside, she was disappearing. People imagine that breakdowns come like explosions, loud, violent, impossible to miss. But for Brenda Heist, it was a whisper. 1,000 small disappointments that finally became too heavy to carry. She was 42 years old. A mother of 2. And she was tired, not from work, but from life itself. That tiredness would become the silent spark of something unthinkable. Because sometimes, it's not the lost who vanish. It's the ones who no longer see a way to be found. It was February 2002, cold, gray, unremarkable. A Thursday morning like hundreds before it. Brenda woke before dawn. She made breakfast, gathered her children's backpacks, and drove them to school. Nothing in her movements betrayed what was coming. No hesitation. No farewell. Just a mother doing what mothers do, making sure her kids got to class on time. She waved goodbye. And then, she was gone. When the children came home that afternoon, their mother wasn't there. The car was later found parked in a neighboring county. Her purse, her keys, her identification, all left behind. Dinner ingredients are still on the kitchen counter, as if she'd planned to come back. But she didn't. Hours turned into a night of panic. That night became a week of searching. And that week became the beginning of a mystery that would haunt an entire town. Police combed through fields and rivers. Flyers went up on telephone poles. Her husband, Lee Heist, sat through endless questions, polygraphs, and whispers that maybe, just maybe, he knew more than he was saying. But he didn't. And soon, the investigation began to stall. There were no footprints to follow. No phone calls. No bank withdrawals. Nothing. Just a woman who'd stepped off the edge of her life and vanished into thin air. Weeks passed. Then months. Friends stopped calling, unsure what to say. Her children stopped asking, unsure what was left to hope for. Birthdays came and went. Empty chairs at school plays. Silence where laughter used to be. And through it all, her family clung to a fading faith that somewhere, somehow, she was alive. But time is cruel. And in 2010, 8 long years after she vanished, the courts made it official. Brenda Heist was declared legally dead. A gravestone without a body. A death without a goodbye. The world moved on. But Brenda hadn't died. She had simply become someone else. When Brenda Heist vanished from Pennsylvania, she didn't disappear into another family's arms or a secret new life. She slipped into the underbelly of America, a world that lives in plain sight, but one most people never see. She wandered into a park that day, unsure of where she was going. There, she met 3 strangers, drifters who offered her something she hadn't felt in years. Not comfort. Not safety. But escape. They were heading south, they said. No plans. No rules. And for reasons she couldn't even explain to herself, Brenda said yes. That single word, yes, unraveled everything that came before it. The mother of 2 from small-town Pennsylvania became another face in the crowd, hitchhiking down the highways that cut through America's forgotten places. She slept under bridges. She scavenged for food behind gas stations. She learned how to fade into the background, to become invisible by choice. There were nights when the hunger burned, when the rain soaked her to the bone. Nights when she thought about her children's faces and the warmth of her home. But shame has a way of chaining people to silence. And for Brenda, every passing day made it harder to turn back. She took a new name, Kelsey Leanne Smith. She drifted between towns across Florida, sometimes taking odd jobs, sometimes relying on the kindness of strangers. Other times, she just survived. She slept in tents, campers, and shelters. She worked cleaning houses, serving food, doing whatever she could to keep moving. And yet, the farther she ran, the heavier her past followed. Her name was gone, but her memories weren't. Each night, as she lay on cold pavement beneath the stars, she would whisper silent apologies to the children she left behind. For 11 years, Brenda Heist existed between 2 worlds, dead in one, invisible in the other. A ghost with a heartbeat. A woman lost not to violence, but to hopelessness. And while her family mourned a death that hadn't happened, Brenda wandered through life carrying the weight of that lie. People say time heals. But time can also bury. And after 11 long years of running, Brenda Heist had buried herself so deeply that she almost forgot she was still alive. Until one day, something inside her finally broke. And the woman who had once disappeared decided it was time to be found. After 11 years of silence, something began to shift inside Brenda Heist. The life she built out of scraps and lies was beginning to unravel. The nights felt colder. The guilt grew louder. And the exhaustion, not just of the body, but of the soul, became unbearable. For over a decade, she had wandered from one forgotten town to another, always looking over her shoulder, always afraid of being recognized, yet secretly longing for someone to finally see her. In Florida, she was living under another woman's roof, cleaning houses to survive. But the weight of her own disguise had become too heavy to carry. She was no longer the carefree runaway who had said yes to a ride south. She was older now. Weary. Haunted. Each sunrise reminded her of the years she had stolen, from her children, from her husband, from herself. And every reflection she caught, in a window, in a puddle, in a passing mirror, showed a face she didn't recognize anymore. One morning, Brenda woke up and knew she couldn't do it any longer. The running. The hiding. The pretending. She walked to a police station in Key Largo, trembling, sunburned, and thin. Her voice cracked when she spoke. "I think I'm someone who's been missing," she said. "I think my name is Brenda Heist." The officer behind the desk blinked, confused. They'd heard confessions before, but this one sounded impossible. After all, Brenda Heist had been declared legally dead 2 years earlier. Her husband had moved on. Her children had grown up. The world had closed her story. Yet here she was, standing in front of them, alive. That moment cracked the story wide open. A ghost had returned from the grave. And with her reappearance came more questions than answers. Why had she left? Why hadn't she come back sooner? And how do you return to a life that has already buried you? For Brenda Heist, stepping back into the light wasn't salvation, it was confrontation. The years of pain, shame, and survival could no longer stay hidden beneath the sand. And as the truth began to unfold, the world would soon learn that sometimes, the hardest part of disappearing, is coming home. When the call came in from Florida, no one believed it at first. The name, Brenda Heist, was one long buried in grief. A name whispered in past tense. A mother who'd been mourned, a wife who had vanished into smoke. But the police in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, ran the fingerprints anyway. They matched. It was her. Brenda was alive. For her family, the news was a collision of emotions: shock, anger, confusion, and grief resurrected. Lee Heist, the man who had once searched for his missing wife, now had to face a reality stranger than any nightmare. He had spent years searching, putting up posters, calling every friend, every hospital, every morgue. He had raised their 2 children alone. He had sat in court, heart-shattered, and signed the papers that declared Brenda dead. And now, she had simply reappeared. Their daughter, now an adult, spoke of years spent wondering if her mother had been kidnapped, murdered, or lost to something unimaginable. She had gone through birthdays with an empty chair, holidays with silence where laughter used to live. And now she had to process that her mother hadn't been taken from her, she had left. That truth cut deeper than any mystery ever could. Brenda told the police her story, of the breakdown that led her to the park that fateful day in 2002. How she cried alone after learning her divorce petition had been denied. How 2 strangers found her, offered sympathy, then an escape. And how she had chosen, in a moment of despair, to walk away from everything she knew. For the authorities, it was closure. For her family, it was heartbreak all over again. In the years she was gone, Lee Heist had remarried. Her children had grown up believing their mother was gone forever. They had grieved, healed, and learned to live again. Now the woman who had once kissed them goodbye at the school drop-off line was back in the world, but she wasn't coming home. Brenda, broken by her own choices, didn't ask for reunion or forgiveness. She simply said she was tired. The world watched as her story spread, the woman who vanished, declared dead, and came back to life. Some saw tragedy. Others saw betrayal. But beneath the headlines, there was a quieter truth. A fragile, human story of someone who'd lost herself so completely, it took 11 years to be found again. And now that the truth was out, the question remained. What happens after you've been found, when the world that once loved you has already moved on? There was no parade when Brenda Heist was found. No tearful embrace at the airport. No cameras capturing a joyous homecoming. Because sometimes, when the dead return, it isn't a miracle. It's a wound reopened. When news reached Pennsylvania that Brenda was alive, the Heist family didn't rush to Florida. There were no plans for reunion, no immediate phone calls. The silence between them was not out of cruelty, but out of years of unspoken pain. Her husband, Lee, later said he felt numb. How do you process the return of someone you already buried? How do you reconcile the mother who vanished with the woman who chose not to come home? Brenda sat in that Florida police station for hours, recounting her story in fragments. Of sleeping under bridges, washing dishes for strangers, and stealing food to survive. Her hands trembled as she spoke. It wasn't just a confession, it was released. The officers didn't see a villain. They saw a woman who had come undone. A mother who had cracked under the weight of her own life and disappeared into the margins of America. Eventually, Brenda reached out to her family. But the connection was fragile, cautious, uncertain. Her daughter said she needed time to process. Her son said he couldn't understand why. The family that once searched for her had already learned to live without her. And in a way, Brenda understood that. Because when she walked away in 2002, she hadn't just disappeared from them. She had disappeared from herself. There would be no happy ending, no storybook reunion. Brenda chose to stay in Florida, seeking help and trying to rebuild the pieces of her life that were left. The past could not be undone, only remembered. And yet, in the quiet corners of her heart, she knew that being found was a second chance, not at the life she left behind, but at finally facing the truth she'd been running from for over a decade. The world may never fully understand Brenda Heist. Was she selfish, or simply broken? Was her disappearance a crime, or a cry for help? The answers lie somewhere between sorrow and survival. But one thing was certain. She was no longer a ghost. Brenda Heist's story is not a tale of triumph. It is a story of survival, sorrow, and the invisible battles that people carry when the world is looking the other way. For 11 years, a family mourned her loss. For 11 years, children grew up without the mother they once knew. For 11 years, a community whispered her name in vain, hoping, praying, searching. And yet, despite all of that silence, Brenda returned. Not as the woman they remembered, but as a reminder that every missing person, every story left untold, matters. There are countless people like Brenda, walking in the shadows, forgotten, unseen, unheard. And every story ignored is a story lost. That is why these files exist. To give voice to those who can no longer speak. To shine light on the forgotten. To remind the world that no one truly disappears if someone remembers their name. If you've watched this far, don't let Brenda's story end here. Don't let her pain and survival be just another video. Like it. Share it. Subscribe to the Found Files. Because for every Brenda Heist who walks back into the world, there are dozens more still waiting to be found. Every click, every share, every subscriber is a small step toward giving hope to those who have none. Brenda Heist is alive. Her family is still healing. And the world has learned a painful truth. Some disappearances don't have happy endings. But every story told keeps hope alive.